Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So today I am going to be talking a bit about affordable housing in London. I've had a few people ask me about this because I did mention it in a couple of my videos where we moved. I mentioned making a video about affordable housing so that you guys could find affordable housing too, and a few people requested it, so I'm making it. It's a bit late, but yeah, life got crazy. You know, we're all in this thing that's happening and it's been madness, but it's also, if you're looking to move, quite a good time to move, just because I think less people are moving, or more people are moving. So there are more available options because people are relocating, moving out of the city. So if you're looking, especially in London where it's so unaffordable, we all know how expensive London is. If you're looking for somewhere in London, it's probably the best time to look because so many people, just because we're basically not going to be leaving our homes for quite a while, are moving further away because they don't have to be in the city, because the only reason they're in the city is that they're working here. And so I've heard that people are moving more further out from the city and places are becoming available in the city. So if you're looking for somewhere, this might be a great time to look because there are some options out there for you, especially if you're on the path to home buying and you're trying to save money. That's the biggest thing for us, is that we wanted to buy, but we're trying to save as much as we can as soon as we can. So we needed to move somewhere more affordable. Even though the place we were in was affordable for the area we lived in, it was very affordable, and I knew it was because I grew up in the area, so I knew how expensive that area is now in comparison to how much it was before. So I knew I had a good deal. But now we have an amazing deal. So I want to share with you how we got our amazing deal. I actually have a video on that. So if you want to actually know the ins and outs of how we got this specific place that we live in now, it's a 2-bedroom in North London. So if you want to know how we got that, do check out my video on how I'm saving over £200 a month by upgrading and moving to a bigger place, because we used to live in a 1-bedroom in East London that cost like over £1,000. So yeah, if you want to watch that video, I'll link it up and down and you can go check that out as well to find out like the story when we first moved. And this will be a more general informational video on the options that are out there if you are on the path to home buying, or these are all rental options, by the way. But if you're on the path to home buying, there's some specific ones for you. If you are just looking to rent at a cheaper rate than what is available on the market, so outside of private renting, which is pretty extortionate, not gonna lie, then there's also an option for you. And if you're looking to maybe stay in your area that you currently live and your area is astronomically priced, there is an option also for you to get a great affordable, harder but a great affordable price if you meet the criteria. Let's go through a few of these rental options in London and the UK, not just London, but specifically London because I live here. There's a couple of options that are London based, but mostly it's general for the whole of the United Kingdom. And I will put all the timestamps down below if you want to see, or right here if you'd like to just like pick the one that you want to know about. So the first one I'm sure you all know and have all heard of is council housing. I put this in there because I want to put every option down, even the ones that are kind of almost non-existent at this point, which is really sad. It's sad for a lot of reasons, because there are people who live in London who can't afford to live in London, who grew up in London and can't afford to stay in London, and council housing was meant for those people. And yeah, I don't know, the way they set out initially, I think they didn't think it through long term. They sold a lot of the council housing, so there isn't a lot left available. And there are people who've been on the list for years, so yeah, council housing is a bit of a non-existent one, but I'll let you know what the eligibility is for council housing. To be eligible for council housing, oh, let me explain what it is. Council housing is subsidized housing by your local borough and the government. So it's housing in, let's say you live in the borough of Barnet. Let's say you live in Barnet, the borough of Barnet. So you live in Barnet, and there are houses built by the local council, like the borough of Barnet. They build houses, and it's completely built for council housing, or a portion of it is allocated to council housing. And each borough has a housing list which you can be on, and you can bid for homes. So you can bid for an apartment or a flat in your borough, and depending on your priority, you will be offered housing, and you'll be offered like 3 chances to accept a house if you're in the highest priority band, 3 chances to go and see a place and either accept it or pass, and then you'll get offered another one, and after your 3rd chance you go to the bottom of the list. So that's for all the priority bands. But if you're in a top priority, that's the only way that you can get council housing now. Council housing is practically non-existent because there's so many people on the list, and the waiting time is like years and years and years, and now they're pretty much only prioritizing people who are in the top priority. So unless you have, let's say, a disability, or you are homeless, or you are maybe like a veteran, there are specific groups that are also a priority, maybe not for a specific reason like disability or homelessness, but maybe key workers and veterans. So if you've been in the armed forces, etc., you are also usually offered priority. So council housing is really hard to get into, honestly. I've been on the list since 2017, and yeah, when I look at properties, I'm like 300 and something, like 100 and 300, and it's not moving because they've changed the priority. It doesn't matter what band you're in now, the top bands get priority, and before it used to be separated, that each band has their own allocated pot or pool of housing to choose from. Now it's like free for all, so there isn't really any housing just for like the lowest bands. So usually top priority is what I told you, and then the mid-range priority is for like overcrowding, and then the bottom range is for like, you're not overcrowded, you just want to leave your home that you currently live in. The other eligibility is that you usually have to have lived in that borough for a certain amount of years, or you have a local connection. So the amount of years is usually like 3 years. So you have to have lived in the borough for like 3 years to be eligible, or a year. But I've typically seen that it's about 3 years, or you have to have grown up there. So yeah, so I grew up in my area that I'm on the list for. So yeah, that's how that worked out. So the pros of council housing, I'll just quickly go over those, is the first pro is that it is the most affordable out of all these options. It's pretty much 50% below market rate. So what private renting would cost in London in that borough, it's about 50% lower than that. I've seen properties on there for like £500 a month, even less. Like that's council housing, heavily subsidized. So that is a pro. You can also stay pretty long term in council flats. Most people spend their whole lives in them. If they are in an area that's great, there's no reason for them to move, and it's affordable, and they don't have any issues, most of the time that they stay there, especially if it's the right size for them, because it's so hard to get another place. Most people don't move or leave. And another pro is that you can get new builds at a lower rate. So if you are on a housing list, sometimes on the housing bidding site, there are new builds that come up from housing associations, but through your council. So it's still heavily subsidized, but not as much as the council housing, like social housing flats that you would find. So you can also, that's another way to get access to like new builds. So yeah, but I'll go a little bit into that later on. That's slightly different because those prices are a bit higher even though they're on the council bidding site. So that's what I've looked at mostly, and I usually just try and apply for like new builds when I'm looking at housing. The cons are obvious. Your eligibility is dependent on your borough, and you need a local connection. There's a long list, no guarantee. Priority is definitely given to people who are homeless or have medical needs, overcrowding, and key workers. And one of the biggest cons is your neighbors. You cannot control who lives next door to you, and I've heard so many stories, and I've experienced some really terrible situations. That's a big con to council housing. You can't control who moves in next to you. You can't really, yeah, the council don't really do much if there is something bad happening next to you. On to the next one. The next option is immediate rent. Immediate rent is our properties or flats by a housing association at 80% of the market rate. So it's a discount on what the original rate is, whatever your market rate is in your area or that borough that it's in. So it's not a 50% discount like council housing, but it's 80% of the rate that you would normally pay, which is really good considering. I'm pretty sure we're in an immediate rent place right now. So yeah, this is what we currently do, and I go into that more in depth in the video that I mentioned before. Eligibility, you have to be earning less than £80,000 a year if you're in the UK. If you're in London, you have to be earning less than £90,000 a year, your household income. You have to be able to not afford to buy on the open market, and you also have to have no mortgage or rent arrears and a good credit. So no CCJs, which is County Court Judgments? I always forget what that stands for. But yeah, you can't have like CCJs, you can't have any rent outstanding. Basically, you have to have a pretty clean rental history and a good credit score. If you have a very low credit score, that usually means that there are things on your credit report that has caused it to be that low. So that's why I'm saying good credit, because you can tell based off of that whether or not you're gonna be accepted, I'd say, because they do an affordability test with you. So they'll ask you a bunch of questions, what your income and your outgoings are. You'll have to provide them with your P60, P40. What is that P called? I am self-employed, so I never know what that P number is. But your pay slip, I guess, to show that you're earning what you say you're earning, or your self-assessment, or bank statements to prove your income and outgoings if you don't have those. So now the pros of immediate rent. So you can get new builds or refurbished apartments for lower than private renting. It's managed by a registered housing provider or housing association. So it's not just some person who's decided to rent out their house, who is deciding the future of where you live. Where we used to live, the person who was renting it out decided that they wanted to raise the rent. I honestly think it was the estate agent who decided that, because they changed what estate agents were allowed to charge when you renewed your contract and when you were signing a contract. So I think they were trying to make up that money, and that's not something that a housing association or a housing provider would do to you, because there are laws and it's in your contract how much they can raise your rent by every year. So you won't just get like footed with you're getting kicked out, or because someone's selling, or this is now your new rent just because we say so. Like, because they know they can get someone else in if you say no. So that is a pro. The biggest con, I'd say, is that the limit is £90,000 of household income. So it's only for people in that mid to lower income range, but not for high earners, which makes it kind of inaccessible for people who are earning a higher wage, it usually means they're able to go and buy on the open market. But if you're not trying to buy, then it kind of sucks for you, because obviously if you want to rent instead of buy, maybe because you're not staying in the UK for long, then yeah, sadly it's not the program for you. So immediate rent is a really great one to get into if you are in that, like, and when I say low, I don't mean really low. Like, each housing association usually has a certain amount that you must meet, like, that you're earning, obviously, because you need to pay your rent and they need to know you're able to pay your rent, which is why they do ask for all that information. So they'll say on the listing whether, like, maybe you need to be earning like 36,000, whether you need to be earning like 40,000 a year or 35,000 a year, 25, whatever it is. It will be listed there, but yeah, usually you need to be earning enough to be able to cover your rent and your expenses. If you're really good with your money and you're tracking all of your expenses, and maybe you're not earning the most, it's also like, it could, as long as you send them over that information, like when they ask you about like your expenses, you're very honest with them, and you know how much you use and that you can afford it even though maybe you're below the income level that they ask for, it's still possible that you could get the place. As you guys know, or if you don't know, now you know, I'm a financial minimalist. I like spend nothing. I do spend money on groceries, and once in a while I spend it on tech and stuff like that for my channel and my business. I only spend money for my business basically. I don't buy stuff. I made a whole video about the things I don't buy anymore. I pretty much don't buy anything anymore. But those are the ones that like stand out. I have really good spending habits. I don't mean to toot my own horn, but I have pretty good spending habits. And I keep a very tight leash on my budget, and I have everything in a spreadsheet, all my income and all my outgoings, which has been very useful. So if you do not track what you're spending, you need to start doing that now, because if you're planning to buy a house, they're gonna ask you for all this information, and having to go through all your bank statements from the last 3 years or whatever, it's just gonna be so miserable. So just have it available, make a spreadsheet every month, put in how much you're spending on what, and just keep a track of it, because it will come in handy later on. I've been asked to give my expenses so many times over the last couple of years for so many different things. So I'm just saying, it's been a lifesaver. I wish that the dude, you know, that shares this flat with me would do that too. The dude, my husband, I wish he'd do it too. He doesn't have time. The next one on my list is rent to buy. This is the most interesting one, and it's the one that I'm kind of most interested in. So I'm gonna explain it a little bit. The rent to buy scheme is basically immediate rent, which was the last one I just spoke about, but with the intention of buying later on. But it's usually a new build that you're moving into and renting at 80% of market value. And then the intention is that I think it's 3 years down the line or 5 years down the line, or at some point down the line, you are going to be buying that flat that you live in through shared ownership. So this is a great option for people who are looking to do shared ownership but aren't ready to do shared ownership, or are not sure where they want to buy a shared ownership property. So this could be a stepping stone for someone who wants to go into shared ownership but are not sure, or just want to have more time and more flexibility to think about it, or they just can't afford shared ownership yet. So if you know you want to do shared ownership, honestly, I think this is the best one. It's like a hidden gem that I'm so scared about sharing with the world, because I'm like, if everyone does it, I will never get a place. But you know what? It's all about sharing, and if it's meant to be, it will be. Like this place, I didn't think we'd get it, but we got ultra lucky. I don't know if we got ultra lucky, but there were other couples and people who wanted to move in, and we tried to build a relationship the best way we can. Thankfully, one of the housing officers was like Canadian. And my husband is Canadian. So yeah, find what is your selling point and be nice to people, man, and be a good tenant. Like, it really, really makes a difference. If you're a crap tenant, no one's gonna want you, just saying. But if you're a nice person who cares about the way you live, you know, and building a nice community, and like, housing associations will love you, they'll want you. So just saying. That's a quick tip. Find what it is. So the eligibility is similar to immediate rent. Is you have to be making less than 90,000 if you're in London, less than 80,000 pounds as a household a year if you're outside London. You can't afford to buy on the open market, including through shared ownership. You have no mortgage or rent arrears and good credit, so no CCJs. And you're generally a first-time buyer. So the pros of rent to buy. The biggest pro for me is that the aim is for you to buy this property, but it's not mandatory that you buy it. I must stress this, because I feel like when people read stuff, they're like, oh my gosh, what if I hate the place and then I have to buy it and I don't like it? it's not by force. You don't have to buy the place. You can also live there and move to buy somewhere else, but they do hope that you will buy the place you lived in, because it's a bit harder to sell a place that has been lived in. So they do want you to live in, like to buy the place you live in, rather than you moving out to a new place and them having to sell that spot to someone else, or to rent that spot to someone else to do the same process for another 3 years or 5 years, however long it takes. So yeah, it's great motivation if you need to save a set amount of money. So one of the big things about rent to buy is that you actually have to save. Something I forgot to mention, geez, it's like the biggest part of the rent to buy scheme, how it's different, is that when you're doing your application, you have an affordability check with an affordability officer. We'll call them an affordability officer. And they set a plan with you of how much you're going to be saving towards buying your property. So you'll see it in the listing. It'll kind of tell you what the average is. But let's say the place that you want to move into, it's going for about 1,200 under shared ownership. And they will rent it to you at £700, but you have to be saving that extra £500 towards buying a house, towards putting it into a deposit to buy through shared ownership that property that you live in, if that makes sense. Another thing is you can rent a property that is smaller, and then maybe you want to move to a bigger property. So that's another way you can kind of do it, but you have to be saving enough for the bigger property that you're aiming for. And the housing officer, like the affordability officer, will go over that with you. But yeah, you'll come up with a plan that's doable, and that's why they usually have an income threshold that you need to meet as a household before you can even do this. Because obviously if they look at your income and they're like, well, the likelihood of you meeting the threshold to transfer into shared ownership is slim, then they're less likely to rent it to you, just because it's for people who are going to buy. But yeah, so it's great motivation if you want to force yourself to save. You could just do immediate rent and save the money yourself. But if you do want to have a new build and you are considering shared ownership, doing that might be the push you need to like really save all the money needed to actually do shared ownership. Another one of the biggest pros is that you get to live in a new build at a discounted rate. Who doesn't want that? So that's kind of like the big appeal for me, because I kind of want to know if I want to live in a new build, and it would be good if you live there for a while. You will know like the issues with the building. You'll know if this is something you want. It'll give you the opportunity to kind of try before you buy, basically. It's literally try before you buy. So that is a great pro, I'd say. Cons: if you don't like new builds, it's not for you. If you don't want to save money to buy a place, it's also not for you. The eligibility criteria could be also a big con if you don't meet the income requirements to do rent to buy, or if you're over the income requirements to do rent to buy. But I do think it's a great option for anyone who's looking to do shared ownership but isn't quite ready and wants to get on the next step now, so they can be like on a pretty much direct path to shared ownership. Yeah, I think it's a really great option for someone in that position. The final affordable housing option that I have is London Living Rent. And this one is very specific to London, but it's quite similar to the previous one. So I'm just gonna skim over it a little bit because it's quite similar to the other, but it's very specific for Londoners only. London Living Rent is for middle income households who are looking to save money so they can buy in the future within like the next 10 years basically. These houses are usually owned by housing associations or housing providers in London. The pros of this option is you get a 3-year tenancy, which is either good or bad. Like if you would like to stay somewhere for 3 years and not have to think about your rent being increased too much, or having to move somewhere and you want somewhere a bit more permanent, maybe you have a child, then that is a good option. You do have support for saving money and the option to buy through shared ownership. This is basically like rent to buy, but specifically for Londoners. So you do have an option of buying your property through shared ownership and other shared ownership properties as well, and you usually have a priority for other shared ownership properties because you are in the London Living Rent scheme. The cons are obviously it's only for Londoners. It might not be for you if you don't want to buy. They have a minimum 3-year tenancy, which can be seen as a con if you don't have a break clause in the tenancy. I think most of them do come with break clauses, but you do have to check your agreement, because if you're planning to stay short term and you know you're not going to be living there for 3 years, it's probably not the best idea for you. So it's to give people security for staying long term. The eligibility as well, which is probably one of the biggest cons, is that you have to have a maximum household income of £60,000. And you also must be unable to currently buy a home, including through shared ownership, in your local area. So that's London Living Rent. London Living Rent is a newer scheme that came about a few years back, and I will leave the information to it down below. There's a website for it where you can find properties. You can also find all of the other options listed other than council housing, which is specifically for a borough. So go to your borough website if you're looking for council housing, and for rent to buy and immediate rent, they can be found either on London Living Rent. For Londoners, I'm not sure about other parts of the UK. I'll try and find out where those are. I think Shared to Buy have those on their website for the UK. So I'll leave that all down below and you guys can check them out if you're looking to move into one of these options. But yeah, good luck. I hope that this has been a helpful video for you and that you're able to find the one that works for you. Anything is better than private renting, to be honest. I hate it and I don't plan to ever go back. So yeah, let's hope that I never have to do that. But the aim is to buy pretty soon. So we've been saving. I've been focusing a lot more on investing than saving for the home, but that will probably be changing in the near future. I am still focusing a lot on it, but because saving rates aren't even that high, like the interest rate isn't great with most banks, I've just been putting as much as I can in my Help to Buy ISA, which is only $200 a month that you can put maximum. So, and that's where I have the best return right now. It's like 2%, which is the best I can find. Thankfully, they haven't changed that, and I'm still able to get a really great return on my money there, quite a bit each month. That compound is working. I can see the compound interest starting to like do its thing. But yeah, so while I'm doing that, I'm focusing on like investing and building that portfolio, so then we can just like go hard into house saving once we have a good base, because investing is kind of like a now thing. Like you need to invest now if you want to see like the good compound interest and returns later on. So that's why it's been my focus, just because we hadn't been doing that in the past, but we've been having savings for a house in the past. So yeah, just find a balance and do what works best for you, and hopefully you will be on the path to home ownership if that's what you're looking for, or just a more affordable renting option if that's what you're looking for. So those are affordable housing options in London and the UK that are available to most people. So you can find them on websites like Share to Buy and London Live and Rent. I'll leave the links down below so you can go and find them. Let me know, have you tried any of these options? Which one would you like to try in the future? Let me know in the comments down below. Please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more housing videos in the future. Until then, I will see you guys in a new video. Bye.